Howdy, I'm Jason Lewis, and today on the old Dodge Ram adventure truck buildup, we're going all in on suspension. That's right, the blue blankets are out and you know what that means. Upgrades, upgrades, and upgrades. Hunker in, this is gonna be an epic piece because we're about to tear this thing apart from front to rear and do some long overdue, not just refresh, but complete updates on this thing. This is a 2009 Dodge Ram 1500, 4x4 of course. And like a lot of half-ton trucks, it has independent front suspension, or IFS, which in my opinion is much nicer to drive and handles way better than a truck with a solid front axle, especially when only used for light-duty work. But until now, the IFS has been a weak spot and looked down on by serious off-road guys. Case in point, I've broken 2 front axles on this thing over the years.
There it is. That guy is toast.
But instead of getting rid of this truck and into huge debt on a pricey new truck, I've decided to rebuild it. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how to take a worn out 10-year-old half-ton truck and make it drive better than new, and be a strong and reliable off-road adventure rig. With this combination of performance upgrades from Icon Vehicle Dynamics, a set of nearly indestructible RCV axles for the front end, and the perfect order of Mevotech X-Factor suspension pieces I got from jcwhitney.com, you can pick any one of or all of these components and rebuild a slightly older truck for a fraction of the price of buying a new truck. Now we're doing a lot at once, I admit, so this is going to be a little bit tricky to explain the specifics on each thing, but obviously the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to pull everything out. Now if you were going to just be replacing the axles, you would do basically you would just unbolt the spindle and get this clear and get your axle out of here. But what I'm going to do is just pull everything out, and then as I install everything, explain it that way. Yeehaw. Off. Now we're going to tuck this up and out of the way for now. And while my current self continues to remove stuff, my past self will demonstrate just how worn out the suspension bushings are. That's quite a bit of movement there on this upper A-arm, but that's okay. It's on the list of things to repair and replace, so back to the future. The wholesale removal of parts is still in progress. Blown out coilover shock removed, followed by a very tired lower control arm. Now it's time to get a pry bar and carefully separate the stock CV axle at the differential housing. This can get tricky, and on the passenger side, things went south. The intermediate shaft came out with a CV axle due to some prior damage inside the solenoid housing. Kind of a bummer, but I just went back to the JC Whitney website and ordered a new one, and a new seal as well. Next up, I removed the old upper control arm, and finally, the tie rod that connects directly to the rack and pinion. And that's the last of all the old junk that we're taking off of this thing. Now, we're gonna clean this thing up a little bit and bolt and install all the new goodness. And by clean this thing up a little bit, I mean scrub the heck out of it, degrease it, and make it pretty with a fresh coat of semi-gloss paint. Ah, that is much better. Okay, so now we're in the back and I'm just disassembling all of the suspension components back here. Now, if you're just doing the Icon suspension lift for this thing, you would literally just unbolt the shocks, drop the axle down, pull the stock springs out, put the springs in, put your new shocks in. But since we're replacing all of these old tired pieces, I just want to get everything out. I'm going to do the same treatment back here as we did in the front, clean it, just freshen it up, paint it, and then we'll install the good stuff. Now, what I just want to show you really quick is that as I got this spring out, these bump stops got put on years ago by the magazine guys, and they looked pretty cool because they went right down inside the springs.
problem, I'm gonna show you a couple problems. They've always bugged me because they made a lot of noise. They rubbed against the springs, and you could see the front of this bump stop, how it's just been self-clearanced by the spring over the years, and that just made a lot of noise. And I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna compress now that I have this spring, the stock spring out of here. Now I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna compress the suspension and show you the other big reason, because I could put up with a little bit of noise if it was really functional, but let me show you why I'm really pulling those out. So there you go. They miss. The whole point of that is to smack that thing, and they just don't really serve the purpose that I think that they were intended to do. So I'm gonna pull those out, and I'm gonna put the stock bump stops back in eventually. Even with these little speed bumps and extra things that you have to do when you dig into some of these projects like this, I'm still stoked. I love this thing, and this is part of the whole reason why I recommend doing something like this to your older vehicle. Instead of just going out and dropping dime on a huge new vehicle, these older trucks are good, and I like the IFS trucks, the half-ton trucks with the independent front suspension, because they just ride so nice. And you'll see that with not that much money. Now, yes, I'm adding big dollar stuff with the new Icon shocks, which are just awesome, but the suspension arms that I'm gonna add, and these little things are little tricks that you can do that don't cost that much. That's what I was surprised about. By going to the JC Whitney website, I started just picking up a few of those going, it really wasn't that much to just refresh this thing. This thing's gonna drive better than it did new because there's just gonna be more high performance stuff on here. So we'll continue to disassemble, clean, and then slap some goodness on here. All right, now before we start the install portion of this video, I just wanted to take a second to explain the fan that you're gonna hear in the background. Sorry for that. We're in the middle of a heat wave here in Southern California. It's 112 degrees out here. I just wanted to share with you that because things are gonna get messy, mostly just me. I'm gonna be drenched, and the equipment, I'm having trouble keeping the camera equipment cool, but let me show you a good example of how this kind of heat can actually really mess with an install. So here's our workspace that we're working on right now. I'm putting the intermediate axle shaft in, and this wrench, I sat down for a second into the sun, and look what happens. I don't know if you can see this. What are we looking at there? 156 degrees, 157, 158 degrees. I'm gonna have to wear gloves just to be able to handle the tools. This is crazy. The side of the truck, check this out. It's hot out here. I think we're gonna abandon this hat. Sorry, it's just too hot for that nonsense. Ain't nobody got time for that. So we're gonna install these gorgeous Icon upper control arms. Pretty easy to get this right. Driver goes on the driver's side. Now would be a great time to talk about the Icon Vehicle Dynamics Stage 5 suspension system we're installing on the Dodge. This is the top-of-the-line kit from Icon for the half-ton Dodge. It includes these gorgeous 2.5-inch shocks that are specifically tuned for this truck and dual-rate springs that will give a slight lift, offer better ride quality, and not affect the load capacity or towing at all. These tubular upper control arms offer better geometry and more wheel travel because of Icon's delta joint. The rear shocks have external bypasses, FK rod end bearings, and an adjustable CDC valve for fine-tuning of the performance. They say to expect about a 2.5-inch lift with this kit.
And we'll grease everything up.
Make sure to put a decent amount of grease inside the bushings of the upper control arms before loosely bolting those into place. Next up, it's time to hoist the beefy Mevotech TTX lower control arm into its new home. And again, just getting it snug for now. The new hub assemblies I ordered can get bolted into the stock steering knuckles at this point. Don't mind those red splash shields. I had some extra brake paint and couldn't leave them alone. Now, the reasons I'm replacing all of the wearable suspension items on the Dodge with the Mevotech X-Factor components is to give the truck a better than brand new feel on the road and to perfectly complement the high performance Icon shocks and springs we're adding. all of your vehicle's suspension bits wear over time and can give a sloppy feel to the handling of your truck. And after 155,000 hard miles on and off road, this truck was pretty sloppy. The Mevotech X-Factor suspension replacement parts offer tougher than factory durability and strength at a surprisingly affordable price. And by the time I priced out individual bushings and factored in the time it would take me to press out old ones and install new ones, it became clear that buying these upgraded components whole actually made better sense.
Okay, next up, it's time for the big chunks. Now we're gonna put what they call the knuckle on now. So I'm just gonna get that started. And now I'm gonna use a jack to kind of get this up, to hold this up into place here.
Okay, time for one of my favorite activities, the stock part versus upgrade showdown. These are the RCV Performance Products Ultimate IFS CV axles. Whew, that's a mouthful. They are brand new in their lineup for us Dodge guys. Their motto kind of says it all. These are the strongest axles on the planet. No more getting stranded in the middle of nowhere with a broken front axle joint. With a lifetime warranty, you get the strength of a solid front axle and the great handling of IFS. You will break other parts in the drivetrain before these, which is actually something to think about. But take this component off the list of weak spots. Use a dab of the RCV supplied moly grease to lube up the splines on the differential output and the end of the axle.
And now what we'll do is that will go right on the splines there. That seemed to go a little too easy. But now that that axle is in, boy, that thing just looks so much beefier. Now that that axle is in, I want to do the same thing to this side and put some grease on the splines. All right, so same thing here. Just gonna put a lot of grease on all these splines here. Get the axle in. Now the axle will come through the wheel hub and stick out here, and we'll get that nut started just to get that captured here. All right, now it's time for a little Icon Vehicle Dynamics coilover goodness for the front of this Dodge.
Start by getting the 3 bolts for the upper collar in place and then finger tight the bolt in the lower bushing on the A-arm. Now it's time to assemble the new steering arm and tie rod end.
We'll do an eyeball alignment before we take it over to the alignment shop.
Then, to finish off the complete refresh of the front suspension bits, a new sway bar end link.
Wow, let's just keep assembling. But there you go, there's all the big ticket stuff right here put together.
Slap the brake rotor back on and bolt the caliper to the knuckle. Don't forget to use Loctite on those. Once it's all together, load the suspension with the weight of the truck and tighten all your junk. Here's the install of that intermediate axle on the passenger side. Carefully guide it into place, grease the seal, tap it flush, and tighten it down. Then, step back and appreciate what is essentially a brand new truck underneath your original sheet metal.
Oh, the heat. So next up, we're gonna slide on up into the rear of this thing, and we're gonna replace all of the rear control arms before we get to install the Icon goodness. These Mevotech control arms have all brand new bushings, and by the time I put together the cost of buying bushings, pressing the old ones out, and putting these new ones in, these things are $40. How do you just not get new ones? So cost effective, this is great. The difference between this and the worn out, I mean, it's just plain to see the old stuff's worn out. So this is gonna make a huge improvement. Now, last I checked, I set the axle at a pretty easy spot for me to be able to get these back in. So let's just see how that goes. Now, a quick orientation guide is the little tab here. I think on a stock truck this probably secured something, but on this truck it doesn't. So that goes there. There we go. So we'll put a washer on that.
Working back here is an absolute cakewalk compared to the front. Simply installing brand new control arms where they belong on a nice clean chassis is a gearhead's dream. However, I think the heat was finally getting to me because
Laying on the ground in 1,000-degree weather under my truck. Life is good. Don't forget to put your rubber isolator in place. Definitely gonna want that thing. And let's put this spring in place.
after you get both of the springs in place, raise the axle enough to line up the holes and mount up these sweet new Icon 2.5 shocks. Once everything's locked and loaded, lift the truck by the rear axle and support it with jack stands. Now, go through and tighten all the components on the rear suspension. And then take a quick victory tour of all this goodness. Now just bolt the tires back on and drop the truck on the ground for our first looks. The front end seemed to gain an inch and the rear gained a full 2. I haven't adjusted anything yet on the coilovers because I want to see what it does when everything settles before I make any changes. But for now, let's go drive this thing.
So the initial feel is the steering is dramatically tighter. Like just everything just feels way more responsive. I got the steering pretty close. Definitely gonna take it to the alignment shop tomorrow. But wow, just crisp. I would say, yeah, I mean, if you could say a truck on 37s feels crisp, it's crisp. I'm gonna take you and climb up a little dirt hill, put it in 4-wheel drive, and actually we're gonna see how just everything feels. Hit a few bumps, get it dirty. And I thought that would be the best way to button up this video instead of just standing in the yard around the truck going, yeah, check it out, it's done. No, we're gonna go drive it. We're gonna go actually put it in 4-low and see what it does. So you have to remember, I've been driving this thing for years with just the shocks were toast on this thing. Absolute, just they were wrecked. So it was basically just spring, no dampening happening. So to go to something like this where there's actually shocks happening, and these Icon shocks with the 7/8 inch shaft, you know, actually offer quite a bit of dampening. So getting used to that is going to be interesting. But right now it's not harsh. You know, I was actually a little nervous that this was going to have a kind of a harsh ride to it. Not at all. Going to be a very nice road trip truck. So I like it. I like it a lot. Now, let's climb this hill here. So we're gonna put the truck into 4-low, put it into drive, and let's see what it does up this hill here. Check out all of our new components, making them do some work right out of the get-go. Well, the 4x4 still works, so that means our intermediate shaft is still working. That's a good sign. Let's hit some bumps here, see how it does, see how the articulation is. This isn't really anything tough, but I just wanted to do some dirt today. This is such a great video in the sense that we did so much. So much to this truck just got done. And boy, that was pretty drama-free. Now we're just in 4 high. Let's kind of just skip on down this road a little bit here. See how it does. This is where this truck is the best. Just Oh my goodness. This feels fantastic. There used to be so many rattles and so much drama with this, and it's all solved. Yeah! I would say this was a tremendous success on all accounts. Fantastic. All right, let's find a spot for some beauty shots and call this one good. So there it is. We threw a ton at the truck this time and it turned out amazing. I put components on here that I have 100% confidence on. Those RCV Ultimate axles, unbreakable. Now it's time to learn how to drive this thing and not break other things. The Icon shocks feel great so far. I'm thrilled. And all that Mevotech stuff just kind of brings the truck back to new. I got a year-old Jasper engine in there that has just been kicking butt, and now the chassis, the foundation of this truck is solid. Now the guys who built this truck, Fred and Frank, did an amazing job. This thing has just such character and has such a great spirit. I'm just fortunate that I'm the guy who gets to spend the next couple of years and thousands of miles having adventures in it. And so until next time, I'm Jason Lewis. Enjoy your drive.